Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this event with local partnerships. My name is Graham Morn. I work at a consultancy called Turner & Townsend. We are running a social housing retrofit accelerator, which we'll be talking about a little bit later on. We're here to provide technical support for anyone putting in a bid to the SHDF. We've got the main focus of this event today will be local partnerships, who'll be talking about their retrofit handbook. The running order today, we'll have Sarah Daly from our SHRA, Social Housing Retrofit Accelerator, just giving some background about it, introduction to it. We'll then hand over to Michael O'Doherty, who will talk through the retrofit handbook. And then at the end of it, there'll be an opportunity for Q&A. So if you want to put questions as we go along into the chat, what we can do is pick them up at the end of the Q&A. And to help us in the Q&A, we have representatives from BAYS to talk through some of the guidance for the SHDF. And on our side with Sarah Daly, we can talk through our service under the SHRA. So are we all happy to move on with the agenda? Yeah, so Sarah Daly, if I can hand over to you, maybe if you can introduce yourself and then go through your presentation.
Okay, so yes, as I said, I'm Sarah Daly, Associate Director at Turner & Townsend, and I'm part of the team that's delivering the Social Housing Retrofit Accelerator. So hopefully you all know about it in terms of the role that we're actually playing supporting the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. So this is effectively a fund which has been nominated at 3.8 billion between now and 2030, and this is the first formal wave of funding, which is around 160 million. It's been developed, or our support has been developed with and for the sector. So it's really important for those of you who are, I suppose, tapping into this sort of approach to retrofit for the first time, that you'll see there's quite a different atmosphere in terms of how we're sort of pulling together the knowledge and the upskilling of those involved in the sector in order to help get the highest possible degree of success with this programme. So this is an England-wide programme and it's aimed obviously at social housing providers in terms of how they approach their retrofit projects. There's a whole raft of free support that's available. So BAYS have very kindly funded this part of the programme. So whether it's one-to-one support or group support, it's all free to access through the team. So I can take you through that in terms of understanding what it's all about in this presentation. Local authorities are the lead bidder, but social housing landlords can be a member of, or you know, it's necessary to be a member of a local authority-led consortium. That can be one consortium or it can be a number of consortia depending on what's actually required. So again, we can outline this and pick up some of the options in the Q&A. So in terms of how we can help you at the Social Housing Retrofit Accelerator, very shortly we're hoping a very comprehensive knowledge hub will be coming online. So that will be drawing together sort of key information, so best practice itself and also broader guidance in relation to retrofit. And this is really important because there are some gaps where it's very difficult to find certain types of information, and there's other areas where, you know, perhaps there's too many options of who to go to, and sometimes you just need one port of call for this. So that's what we're hoping to provide with the Knowledge Hub. So this will sort of develop and run on hopefully for a number of years. In terms of other types of support, we've got workshops, seminars, drop-in sessions, clinics, all sorts of different variations really of support that we can offer. And this is being delivered in a very responsive way. So sometimes we're actually responding to requests that come up in the Q&A in one session, and we're putting on an event to address that the following week. So just to give you an example, we're running something like 24 events, internal and external events over the next 2 weeks or the current 2 weeks. So there's a huge amount of activity going on. We're very aware we're in conference season at the moment, so we are obviously competing with a lot of other big events too, some of which we're speaking at ourselves. But that's why we're also sort of creating masterclass content, where effectively we do dry recordings of the classes that we've been running in these sort of short sessions, and they're then being uploaded onto our website. So again, during the SHRA website, not the Turner and Townsend one. So the idea is that we're creating an on-demand accessibility type approach to this as well, because we realise that not everyone can attend live events. So in terms of one-to-one support, if you've undertaken a self-assessment, which again we'll put the links into the chat, but there's all sorts of support that's available to you, particularly if you're deemed to be bid ready for wave 1 and you have a bid value in excess of £1 million. That then unlocks a whole range of very tailored and targeted support, which is based on the very specific requirements that your consortium would require. So whether you're a one local authority with one housing association creating a bid that might be worth over £1 million, or whether you're a combined authority with many local authorities and many housing associations within that group, we can tailor it to those requirements. So this isn't an exhaustive list, but it gives you an idea of some of the topics that we're offering direct support on, but also providing masterclasses and other content in as well. So these are the areas that we picked up through the survey that we did right at the beginning, and also through the conversations that we're having in direct bid support, and also in the Q&As that are arising out of our briefing sessions. And the important thing here is that, again, it's a mix of Turner and Townsend professionals, but also what I call the glitterati of the housing and retrofit world. So we've got lots of great speakers, people like Russell Smith from Retrofit Works and David Pierpoint from Retrofit Academy. Peter Rickaby, lots of other, Lisa Pasquale, published experts who are obviously giving, again, very high level tailored support, so that we're really getting on top of this upskilling right the way across the piece and making sure you've all got the toolkits you need. In terms of group support, this is a screenshot from actually this week by the looks of it, or a section of this week in terms of some of the classes that we're rolling out. So if you haven't already registered on our website, I recommend you do, because then you'll get our newsletters and also our event bulletins, which will allow you to book into events directly from your inbox, or take you directly to the website to do that. So we've got a whole range of things which will help you in terms of your bidding ability, to understand what you need to do to not only be bid ready, but to create bid excellence. And then there's a whole range as well of technical masterclasses to help make sure that you understand again how to meet the sort of perhaps more detailed aspects of the content that's required by the bid process. So one-to-one support I mentioned, so it's triggered by the self-assessment. So we undertake an initial detailed diagnostic call, and that allows us, it's a really important part of the process actually, just to make sure we understand where you are and what you need, and that varies massively across the range of different people we have within our spectrum at the moment. Some are bid ready and need very little support, and others need intensive support across a number of different areas. So that's what we're here to do. And within that bespoke support plan, we can make sure that you're ready for wave 1, but it might be deemed that there will be future waves that you should be breaking out, so that effectively you're, as a lead bidder, putting together your sequencing of what you might want to do over a period of time in terms of the future waves and how they'll arise. So the report plan, as I say, is at the moment very much aimed at wave 1, so the deadline of the 15th of October. And the point here is that we're going to make sure that, again, between that combination of some of the masterclasses that we're offering and the detailed individual support, that you get the highest possible opportunity to succeed in bidding. So the self-assessment's available on our SHRA website. We'll, as I say, put the links in the chat shortly. It takes about 15 minutes to complete. We're getting to the end of the time when it's really going to be viable to have that sort of support, but it hasn't closed as yet. So if you haven't already completed the self-assessment, it's really worth doing that. And again, as I've said, it's going to give you an idea of where you are. So even if you don't decide to proceed at this stage, it will help to identify what you need to be working on ahead of the next wave. So let's just have another quick look at the actual SHDF criteria. So as I mentioned, it's a 3.8 billion fund, which has been allocated over a 10-year period. So subject to spending reviews, we are expecting future waves to be triggered next year. We don't know when those are yet, and we also don't know yet how the parameters might change. The competition scope has been published. The guidance is very clear, but the consultation period, which was for 2 weeks, has just ended. So now, if you've got any queries on anything to do with the guidance or the scope, then please do ask our team and they can help you with that. The project, as we said, has to be led by a local authority and they have to be located within England, and it's not necessary for that local authority to be stock owning. So that's an important point that often arises where local authorities themselves get confused and say, well, we haven't got any stock, or we're not putting stock forward through our ALMO, do we still need to be the lead bidder? And the answer is yes. However, the local authorities or consortia, particularly groups like combined authorities, often decide that they're going to put in multiple bids themselves. So the way they organise the threads within their bids can vary, and that can be within one wave or potentially in multiple waves. So again, that's something that our team through the bid support process are getting to understand in terms of how that's playing through. Some are still deciding what they're doing and putting their strategy together, and others have already closed off their strategies completely, and they're now, very much in that sort of final phase of putting their bids together ahead of the deadline. In terms of again, what this is open to, so it's any social housing providers, regardless of archetype. So again, blocks of flats are eligible, as are individual houses, and it's on and off gas grid. So again, really important, because there is a little bit of a crossover between perhaps this and strategies that might be used for LAD or HUG funding. Works must adopt a fabric first lowest regrets approach. Now we've got a webinar running tomorrow actually that James Traynor is presenting, again another one of our top eco housing celebs, so that's a great one. Again, if you haven't found that, do register for it, but that will take you through exactly what fabric first lowest regrets actually means. So properties must reach an EPC band C and space heating equivalent of 90 kilowatts per square metre per year. And as you're probably hearing more and more, the alignment with PAS is 2035 is absolutely critical, and installers need to be Trustmark or MCS accredited. So again, we've got plenty of sessions running which will explain PAS compliance and also explaining out what's involved in PAS 2035, and also we've got some sessions looking at what local authorities or housing associations need to do to understand how to put their supply chains together, or if you're in the supply chain, how to respond to these particular requirements. I won't go through the cost caps specifically because you can see them there, but the important point there, which comes up frequently, is that the registered providers need to provide at least a third of eligible costs. We have been asked several times by local authorities as lead bidders if they are required to contribute, and the answer is no, they're not. It is unless they've got an ALMO or their own stock, but it is the requirement of the owner of the social housing to contribute. And there's a 15% cap on admin costs. So again, it's worth sort of flagging up again why in some situations it's actually been very helpful to have this consortium approach, because that then spreads the load of the admin costs. And we found several situations where smaller housing associations have actually said the availability, for example, of retrofit coordinators and designers, etc., within a team consortium approach has actually helped them to know that they can work efficiently within this bid window. And any eligible measure under SAP can be installed with this funding, with of course the exception of fossil fuel heating systems. So this is the first time really we've got into a stage where you can't replace an inefficient gas boiler with a more efficient one, and hence again we're going through a very important stage in terms of making sure that everybody understands what the alternatives are and how to seek them. So very quickly I'll take you through the milestones. So the guidance was published on the 23rd of August. So you know, we're now well into the bid period, into week 3 now of an 8-week bid window. The 2-week clarification period has ended, so that's not much we can comment on that, apart from saying that again, a lot of the questions that arose during that period we can now act upon if we've had the answers to them, so that's really helpful. So the deadline is the 15th of October, and then there's a period of bid assessment, and you'll be notified if you are successful by December, with the projects actually starting in January, and the very specific requirement is to complete them by January 2023. Couple of things to mention there. If you are bidding and you're getting your bid in by the 15th of October, we'll also be providing some support, very important support actually, around mobilisation, because it's really important that you don't sit on your laurels waiting to find out whether you've been successful or not, because if the clock starts on the 1st of January, you really do need to be ready to go, and there are all sorts of things which will need to be enacted in the period, and probably should be starting now, to be honest, including things like planning and resident engagement, and you know, the things which are going to supplier engagement, all of the things which are going to take some time to put in place. There is a discretionary opportunity for a 2-month extension at the end of January, but that can only be applied for once you're successful and in that bid period. So you can't build it into your programme or ask for it at the beginning. It's discretionary according to circumstances that arise whilst you're in the process of delivering. So finally then, if you haven't already done so, please complete the self-assessment, and that will help us to assess your readiness to bid. It says link below, but the link will go into the chat. Well, you need to obviously at that point scope the opportunity for submitting a bid from your side. So what is your sort of beyond answering the questions, you know, then you need to make the bid no bid decision yourselves as an organisation. It's vitally important, of course, to secure senior level buy-in, and that needs to happen not necessarily before you complete the self-assessment. You might need to do the self-assessment to help inform whether or not you think you are bid ready yourselves, but you need to certainly have those discussions concurrently, and of course make sure that you've got appropriate budget available to support your bid as well. If you're a local authority, then you might already be talking to social housing, and if you're a social housing partner, then you might already have identified your local authority. But if that's not the case, then again, please complete the self-assessment, and to a certain extent we're able to identify what's happening. We're operating as regional teams, supporting throughout the 5 regions of England, and our teams are very close to understanding what's happening in particular areas. That said, you don't actually have to bid with your local authority, if that makes sense. So where the stock is based is actually less important, and it may well be, particularly if you're a larger housing association and you have stock all across England or in several territories of England, you may wish to pick one local authority to partner with, or a number of local authorities according to their particular strategies. It's really important to identify and assign staffing resources to this process, and obviously we're getting quite close to the wire now, so you really will have had to identify who's going to manage your project and who's going to be responsible for your bid writing. And again, we've got plenty of support in both those areas to ensure that you're on track if you are deemed bid ready for October. And also it's really important that you let us know if there are any areas that you want us to cover in the programme. So we're being really responsive here. We put the programme together on the basis of best endeavour from the topics that are coming up, but all the time new ones come up, and as I say, we're really trying to respond to that. And if you sign up to our newsletter, that will help keep you engaged with everything we're doing. So that's basically it. These links I'll put into the chat. but I'll hand back to Graham.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks for the comprehensive run through of our service. I've put the link in the chat to get in touch with us, so please do click on it and follow through there. We will move on now to Michael O'Doherty, who from Local Partnerships. Michael, if you give yourself a proper introduction and talk through their retrofit handbook.
Thanks, Graham. I'm just checking you can see that okay?
Yeah, we can see that.
Yeah, good. Okay, morning everybody. Michael O'Doherty, as Graham says, I'm a project director at Local Partnerships. And for those of you who don't know Local Partnerships, we are a joint venture between the Local Government Association, SHRA and the Welsh Government. We work solely for the benefit of the public sector, and we bring in a lot of very experienced people from across a whole range of sectors, and we just outlined some of them there. And as you can see, housing, energy, infrastructure, obviously relevant to the discussions we've been having today. So in terms of the piece of work that we've produced, it's the local authority focused piece of work, domestic retrofit handbook, very much brought in kind of March earlier this year with a specific kind of role to support the regional energy hubs on the LAD2 funding, particularly because that was funding that needed to have regional energy hub coordination through those areas. So we've brought in some of our experienced housing energy efficiency staff. So myself, for example, I led the Greater Manchester Green Deal and eco work back from 2010 to 2015. People who've worked at a senior level within local authorities in particular, that are able to bring not just, if you like, the energy efficiency knowledge, but the whole programme management and support, the leadership piece, connecting members and delivery as well. So I think that's the piece of work that we've produced. You can see that there is a link there that you can follow to access that document. And I think it's important to say, just in terms of distinguishing what we've done from what Sarah's been talking about, and obviously the social housing accelerator, this is much more of a cross-tenure approach. It was in recognition, I think, of the number of different funding opportunities that were coming forward, all of which required local authority coordination and support, and also recognising that a lot of the local authorities either didn't have or had lost its experience and its capacity in relation to energy efficiency and energy efficiency programmes. So the handbook, as you go through it, is very much providing that starting point, that kind of how to get going from a local authority perspective, recognising that without that, some areas might actually be left behind in terms of accessing funding, not just for the social housing decarbonisation fund, but the LAD2 funding, the HUG funds as well. So recognising again that a number of authorities just didn't have the capacity and the kind of finances to move on with these programmes. It was about trying to signpost existing guidance, and we've done a lot of that in this document. So work by, for example, the Retrofit Academy, UK Green Building Council, in terms of their retrofit playbook, making sure that we didn't repeat or duplicate, but actually signpost and have links directly to their work. So the other point to say about this document, it's very interactive. It's quite heavy in terms of the overall pages, but because of the interactive nature, you can actually link through to the bit that you want quite quickly from the contents or from the other kind of links that are in there as well. And we started it off very much from a understanding what local authorities required position. So with the LGA's involvement, we had a survey of local authorities. We got over 70 responses, and as I'll come to a little bit later, that helped us to determine where we think this handbook needed to be focused, because there is a danger, I think, in all of this. There's a lot of organisations producing support, producing guidance, some of it very technical. We were quite clear that this isn't a particularly technical document. We had to make sure that it did provide the support that local authorities were looking for. Due to time, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I thought it'd be helpful just to kind of demonstrate the areas that we've covered. So there's a whole piece around background around getting started, understanding the context, and I think particularly important for local authorities, understanding how domestic retrofit links to net zero targets, the difference obviously between your own stock, social housing if there is local authority retained stock, but also the role that private rented sector and owner-occupied homes have in achieving your target. And those targets have been determined in different areas in slightly different ways. But ultimately, every local authority is going to have to look at how it supports, enables, drives work in the private sector to enable it to achieve its wider goals as well. So although recognising how challenging that can be, dealing with the private sector, owner-occupiers in particular, understanding that there are ways to start that on a kind of a slow approach. In terms of key roles and partnerships, as Sarah said, it's basically making sure that you've got the right leadership from the start, whether it's members, senior responsible officers, and getting that golden thread, if you like, from the top of the organisation down, links through to a strategy, starting off with more of a kind of a basic plan, but linking that into a wider strategic approach, and looking at how you can potentially work with other local authorities to get a wider geographical footprint, maybe share resources and bid more collaboratively. In some areas that there's an obvious link, whether it's counties and districts or whether it's combined authorities, but actually other areas where there isn't the capacity or the knowledge, but by coupling up with those areas around that maybe have a bit more skills and experience, it can certainly help you to get started. As you'll see, there's a whole section on developing the business case. So from the early stages in terms of how to proceed, what models to use, we explore around things like how to engage with the owner occupiers, whether it's a one-stop shop model, the kind of the risks involved with the different approaches, but how you might start slowly but build up there as part of your wider strategy and business case development. So the whole section on that based on the 5-case model. And then again, procurement, our organisation, local partnerships, does a lot of work with local authorities in terms of procuring, accessing frameworks, supply chains, etc. So there's been quite a lot of work in there, again, in an interactive way to show what opportunities there are for different frameworks within each area, links back to each of the regional hubs in terms of the work that they were doing for LAD 2, but some of that is ongoing as well, but then support in terms of maybe setting up your own procurement approach as well. And then the final sections around skills and accreditation, and the whole work around accreditation. So links back to, for example, Retrofit Academy and some of the important work that they've done, such as a social housing retrofit handbook. And as we update this, obviously more and more pieces of work will come forward, and the work that Sarah's been talking about this morning will obviously be able to be linked back into this as well. The final section is all about the different funding models. So Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund is one of them, but obviously for other 10 years, other pieces of work, showing the advantages, what the particular kind of advantage for each local authority is, how you might blend some of the funding between them, how they blend, for example, with these existing funding such as ECO. And then the final sections, there's a whole references section with direct links to a whole range of documents that we think are good practice and should be, if you like, a starting point for those local authorities who are starting out. Just in terms of the interactive nature, so I'm not going to go into the document here today, but you can see if you linked on any of these links above, it would take you to a summary from each of those regional hubs, for example, and that would then give you an opportunity to link into their websites and to their own frameworks. And then there's a whole what we call a toolkit, so some resources that we've linked to this, and over time will develop. So, for example, what we're not suggesting is that every local authority develops a kind of comprehensive strategy at the outset, mainly because it's challenging, it's expensive, time consuming. You probably may need to bring consultants to help you to do that. So, but there's quite simple ways of building a plan, and we've described it as a plan on a page, and we've given a template there of the kind of information that you'd need to pull together around fuel poverty, around previous work with energy programs, renewal schemes, etc. They can start to build up into to help you to prioritise those areas that you may wish to put forward for funding. Very much our work is around not just responding to individual funding pots as they come forward, but to develop that wider strategic approach. And again, the plan on page is the first step towards doing that. We've highlighted a whole list of what could be considered as critical success factors. So again, one of the toolkit resources enables you to go in and look at the type of opportunities and outputs that you require and the work that needs to be done to be able to get into that. There's a whole section on risk. The risks involve both financial but reputational as well, in terms of potentially having schemes and communicating those schemes to members of the public, making sure that you've got a good customer service, that the delivery side is good enough, because a lot of local authorities in previous years have had frameworks that have ended up not delivering or not delivered exactly what the customers required. So there's a whole piece there around making sure you have a risk framework, a risk register, and ensuring the governance behind that leads up to the top of the organisation. And then finally, from our perspective, and I think really important, is understanding where local authorities are at a point in time. So we undertook a survey of the responses from 70 local authorities, just to understand where domestic retrofit was in terms of their priority, where it was in terms of their capacity and their knowledge. And I think, again, that's, as a toolkit, that's something that we will do over a period of time to update, to hopefully see that there has been an improvement in the knowledge and the skills. But just to quickly take you through some of the findings that we had, and this is back probably in May, June this year. Clearly there was a most local authorities responding, there was not a great capacity in terms of capacity. Most people it was less than one person able to deal with domestic retrofit opportunities, and yet at the same time domestic retrofit was seen as a very high priority for those local authorities. So there's a little bit of a tension there between recognising how significant and important it was, but not having necessarily the skills and the knowledge to be able to respond to that. We asked local authorities to score their readiness to drive domestic retrofit projects and to successfully bid for funding. As you can see, where 0 is not ready at all and 5 is able to respond now, most people are in that kind of still significant work to do, although there's some authorities that were in a position to be able to getting closer to be able to respond now. We found that generally that tended to be the larger authorities, the cities, as you might expect, the combined authorities. And we also asked which areas of domestic retrofit has the local authority got plans to improve. And so you can see again, those that had a landlord function had retained their stock. Clearly that was a big priority for them and something that they're able to do much more directly. Coming back to Sarah's presentation, I think there's a recognition that where you do have your own stock, or you do have that relationship with the local social landlords, it's a really good place to start, both in terms of developing the supply chain, but also in terms of testing out how the different technologies work, how the retrofit works, so that by the time you go to the wider owner-occupied sector, you've got more of a tried and tested model. But again, most local authorities came back and said it was owner occupiers, particularly low income, fuel poor households, that they wanted to prioritise, and the private rented sector was a big issue for them as well. So we try to reflect these within the handbook, and I think following that, which are the areas that local authorities needed most support with, and as you can see, funding and finance models, skills development, customer journey, developing a strategic kind of approach, developing the supply chain. But it was helpful just to see of the responses where it was felt that most support was required. And in terms of biggest challenges local authorities face, it was and is still lack of resource, followed by lack of knowledge. So I think the important point from our perspective is that we could produce a handbook that local authorities can pick up, can point to, if you like, more specific good practice information, and and particularly where, for example, the work that Turner and Townsend are doing, that we can make those links through to them as well. And I think it's important that collectively we try to make sure that this guidance that's out there does kind of relate to each other, rather than just be pieces of work on their own. So from the local partnerships perspective, we have got significant feedback back from local authorities and the energy hubs. A lot of that is good, but we've also asked where there are areas that need maybe updating or additional toolkit resources, any gaps and omissions, that type of thing. We do plan to kind of run a survey, you know, at a periodic time to get more kind of sense of what needs to go in there and make sure that we can update it. And again, we'll be working with others to make sure we can do that as the new funding programs come on board. So if anyone's got any questions, obviously we can ask them now in the Q&A, but there's my contact details as well if you'd like a further discussion. Graham, over to you.
Right.